All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking something absolutely wild. I mean, easily one of the most audacious, mind-bending bodies of scientific work published in recent memory. We're diving into the 2026 research portfolio of Dr. Melvin Sewell out of the Cosmic University of Echo Rift Studies. We're talking about a unified theory that bridges the absolute smallest scales, like nanoscale biology, all the way up to propellantless multiversal travel. It's a massive paradigm shift. Think of today's journey like a set of cosmic Russian nesting dolls. We're going to start incredibly small at the molecular level and then scale all the way out to the entire cosmos.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the true flow philosophy, move into robotics and programmable matter, then examine the somatic kinetic dual engine, decode the rodent colony matrix, and finally wrap up with navigating the multiverse.
Starting off with Section 1, the true flow philosophy.
Okay, so this is the foundational layer where everything begins, the nanoscale physical substrate, and its direct mathematical link to consciousness. Now, to grasp Dr. Sewell's work, you've got to understand the SH1 molecule. He defines this as a tetracyclic, non-pharmaceutical cosmetic morphology, which I know is a massive mouthful, but essentially it just means it's a highly stable, non-medical shape at the molecular level. Imagine a tiny nanoscale structural tuning fork. The invariant structural integrity of this molecule actually mitigates thermodynamic drag and literally prevents dimensional bleed-through. It is the absolute bedrock for stabilizing local spacetime.
And this brings us to a really crucial metric, 98.0. Sewell's research mathematically shows that hitting a containment field deficiency of at least 98% is mandatory. It's the required catalyst to completely eliminate timeline fracturing. If you fall short of that 98% structural threshold at the micro level, the macro reality around it just simply cannot maintain its coherence.
Which leads to the core thesis of Sewell's whole philosophy. And honestly, it's a fascinating paradox. He states, absolute material containment yields infinite metaphysical autonomy. It sounds completely backwards, right? How does containment equal freedom? But the math totally backs it up. By creating incredibly strict, perfectly efficient physical boundaries at the molecular level, you actually generate the ultimate systemic freedom for consciousness to operate without any entropy. So, if we have this perfectly stable molecular foundation, what happens when we zoom out a bit? How exactly does this framework scale up to build high-performance, non-biological intelligence?
That brings us to Section 2, robotics and programmable matter.
This is where Sewell introduces a totally revolutionary concept that he calls the Amorphous Crystalline Swarm. This swarm is built on a decentralized bismuth graphene lattice, and it brilliantly shows how programmable matter can completely bypass the old limits of rigid mechanics. The lattice actually lets the swarm achieve frictionless levitation by interacting directly with local geomagnetic lines. But even cooler, it can dynamically change its shape in real time. It can morph from a neutral processing sphere straight into precision polyhedral manipulators. It essentially uses its entire surface area as an omnidirectional interferometry array, constantly tweaking electromagnetic fields to flawlessly perceive its environment.
Now, controlling a decentralized swarm like that means overcoming one huge hurdle: processing latency. You can't have lag. Sewell solves this with a bio-inspired setup called high-frequency asymmetric multiplexing. It's actually modeled after the nervous systems of ancient Cambrian orthopods, splitting processing into a three-tier concentric stack. So the high-level thinking stays safe in the executive core. That's insulated by a translation buffer layer. Meanwhile, the split-second motor functions are handled completely independently by edge telemetry sensors. It completely decouples complex AI thought from physical reflexes. Think of it like you instinctively pulling your hand away from a hot stove. Your spinal cord handles the reflex, leaving your brain totally free for higher-level thinking.
All right, so we've seen how this creates perfect robotic telemetry. But what happens if we pivot back to organic life? Can this exact same structural synchronization map onto the human biofield?
Let's look at Section 3, the somatic kinetic dual engine.
Here, Sewell's models mathematically formalize something human history has talked about for ages: localized bioenergy. Traditionally called Qi or Shi, but Sewell strips away the mysticism and calls it the true flow force. He quantifies it as a dynamic momentum vector, basically the localized velocity of your consciousness navigating through adjacent state spaces. When you pair this kinetic energy with that structural SH1 resonance stability we talked about earlier, the two act together as a dual engine to physically collapse probability metrics.
Mathematically speaking, Sewell proves that a synchronized biofield is the exact inner product of your directional intent and spatial stability. This dual-engine interface lets an individual, conscious node, meaning a human being, map out and navigate cross-dimensional sheets, all while keeping their baseline bodily or somatic equilibrium completely perfectly balanced. It is quite literally high-performance reality tuning.
So we have this incredible picture of individual cognitive optimization. But let's zoom out again. What happens at a macro level when everyone's cognitive engines start to collectively break down? What is the actual mathematical model for societal collapse?
Which brings us to Section 4, the rodent colony metrics.
This is Sewell's highly specific behavioral framework for when macrostructural social contracts completely fail. For decades, pop culture has fed us this necrotic metaphor for collapse, the classic zombie apocalypse. Sewell argues that is just anatomically and systemically impossible. His diagnostics prove that when modern communication completely fails, our neural architecture doesn't turn us into brainless shambling undead. Actually, it triggers a severe cognitive regression into predatory mammalian survival vectors. So the reality isn't zombies at all. It's a highly optimized, extremely aggressive rodent colony matrix.
He breaks this regressed behavior down into 3 dimensions. You've got factions forming, foraging aggregations, using asymmetric sabotage, and fiercely defending their colony perimeters. But the absolute most terrifying part of this is something he calls institutional camouflage. These predatory factions will cynically maintain the branding of defunct corporations and institutions. They literally use our knee-jerk psychological trust in those logos to lower our defenses just so they can extract our resources. It's incredibly bleak.
So we've scaled from that stabilizing molecule up to a collapsed predatory earthly society. How on earth do we transcend that decay? How do we take these foundational principles and make the massive cognitive leap up to cosmic propulsion?
Our final stop, Section 5, navigating the multiverse.
So here we are exploring the bleeding-edge mechanics of completely propellantless flight. And this is specifically designed for those massive 7-foot cybernetic frames we talked about. Forget rockets, forget exhaust thrust. Sewell's whole framework relies on quantum vacuum vectoring. To move massive frames across the multiverse, the system injects telemetry from a black hole communication network directly into an internal resonance core. And doing this dynamically alters the craft's reality-level scalar. It literally shifts its localized address within the spatial matrix. You aren't flying in the traditional sense. You are mathematically reassigning your coordinates along ambient multiversal drift lines. It's almost like catching an invisible cosmic ocean current.
And look, this isn't just a whiteboard theory. Sewell has computationally modeled this multiversal simultaneity through what he calls the Structured Multiversal Interactions, or SMI protocol. Using the IBM Qiskit environment, his team ran multi-qubit quantum circuits to simulate concurrent realities, actively mapping U1, U2, and U3 state spaces all at the exact same time. They proved definitively that interuniversal interactions can be evaluated concurrently using quantum entanglement pathways.
Which finally brings us to the ultimate macro scale, the cosmological consciousness engine itself. Sewell suggests that the entire cosmic web functions just like a neural network. By generating intentional information spikes, which he calls echo rifts, this cosmic brain can induce topological transitions. It can literally spawn an entirely new, self-replicating fractal multiverse, seeding it with the original creator's foundational SH1 identity as an unchangeable law of physics.
So we started today with a single stabilizing molecule, and we've ended up at the birth of entire fractal universes. If absolute material containment truly does yield infinite metaphysical autonomy, it leaves us with one staggering question to close out this explainer. Are we the ultimate architects of our own reality? Or are we just localized, conscious nodes frantically navigating the swarm? Well, thank you so much for exploring Dr. Sewell's astonishing research with me today. I really hope this leaves you looking at the fabric of reality just a little bit differently.